Okay, I'm gonna sign on.
Sign on.
Is it from an email from Sue or what is it?
No. Well, here, hang on. This is probably Sue. Admitting Sue. Admitting Sue.
Seriously, I don't know what to look for.
You've got to go to the Brissalom thing and use the thing. Use their sign-on procedure.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I've got the document. I'm sharing the document.
Fantastic. From this weekend, you don't have to actually for this show that on the screen. I'm just going to use it as something that people can refer to.
Well, if you need to, we can do that. It just depends on whether people are.
I think that's great, and I'm also going to post the link in the chat.
Okay. There we have it. Isn't Google Docs wonderful?
Isn't it wonderful? That means I'm going to have to get a Google account.
Yeah. It has an option that says that anybody who has the link can get to the document.
That's weird.
You can choose. Well, you can choose that. You don't have to choose that.
Oh, because I when I tried to do that, it told me I had to log in.
Well,
Yeah.
Anyway, there we have it.
There it is, as we say.
There it is.
There it is. Awesome. So how are you all doing?
We're just fine.
Good.
We're trying to survive.
Yes. Survival is key today.
Oh, in Brooklyn, somebody blew the shofar yesterday. So I think maybe we should blow the shofar on this.
Oh, no, my God. No. Isn't that political?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
It is.
Yeah. We'll reach out to Mark Levine. Oh, could you blow the shofar for us today? Why? No reason.
It's a new day in America. That's why.
Oh my God.
We usually blow the shofar when it's a new day.
Yeah. I was after I was with you guys, I got onto YouTube to see if there was anything, like a live update or whatever, and I got onto the one on CNN where the black commentator was weeping.
Wow.
I don't know if you saw this from this. He was just he could not speak. And he kept wiping his eyes and he said, I kept saying to my boys, this election is about integrity and about character. He says, and now I can truly go back to my children and say, this really was about integrity and character. And he couldn't even talk. It was incredible. So.
Well, you know that Biden's kids have all married Jews. Every one of them.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting.
Bo was married to a Jewish woman. His kids are Jewish. Then Hunter married her. His sister-in-law, he married his sister-in-law.
Yeah.
Then that didn't work out. He married another Jew. Her name is something or other Cohen. And Ashley is married to a Jewish ENT doctor.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
I was going to say, all the Kushner boys followed my cousin's thing from this, and all married non-Jewish women who converted. So.
Yeah. So Biden, it's a Catholic Jewish thing.
Right.
And of course, Kamala is married to a Jew. So it's like, the Jews all over the place.
My my cousin Eddie Resnick, may he rest in peace. His first wife was a Rockette, and his second wife was an Elle magazine model, and I mean, he got along very well. I mean, he got along very well with his ex-wife, who came to the wedding of the second marriage, and and then Eddie introduces Marion to the ex-wife to the rabbi for this. And by the way, both of the women converted, and Eddie he looked like a troll. Okay, he was short and fat and from this and just kind of wild hair, and he was not very good looking at all. And the rabbi said to him, I have to ask. I have to ask this. How is it that you have attracted these two incredibly beautiful women? I mean, come on, man. And then he says, it is my mission in life to find the most beautiful shiksas in the world and convert them and bring them to the fold. Oh, God. So there you go. Deborah Kagan, what's up? Put yourself off mute.
Here
There
I
you
am.
go. That's your
Still,
Deborah.
it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I have a feeling of well-being. All is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite interesting. I'm personally holding my breath until January 21st.
Good point.
Yes.
So maybe there'll be an armed insurrection. I don't know.
God, I hope.
Who knows?
You got that? No, I'll admit him.
It's Aaron. It's Aaron.
It's Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
Okay, we have a quorum for this discussion.
Yes. By the way, I got an email from Renee Stern. She can't join us today because they're unpacking. They moved.
Yeah.
Yeah, she talked about the fact that they were moving.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or that just kind of went by.
It was dark. Is that what she said?
He said that it was an older building and there wasn't enough light. These newer buildings have much bigger windows and so on. So they moved.
Well, she's now across the street from the Kroger in Montrose.
Oh.
So she's in one of the buildings there. So, yeah.
Where is the Kroger in Montrose?
It's on Montrose at Yoakum.
Okay.
So
Did you just admit Lisa?
I did.
Lisa, are you there? Hi.
There's Marcia. Boy, they're coming in fast and furious,
Yeah.
or fast anyway.
I hope they're not
Well,
furious.
they have 3 more minutes to make it in.
Fast and Furious 5.
Fast and Furious 5, right? Right. All right. Okay. And then when more people come in, I'll upload the link for the document. So, hello, Marcia. Hello, Lisa.
Hey, hi, Sue.
Huh.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, we'll be here in just a second.
No problem.
We'll wait for him. We've got 2 more minutes anyway, but we'll probably
Martin,
get-
why does that document have the invisibles showing? It's irritating.
Oh, let me get rid of the invisibles. Now you're happy?
Yes,
She's ecstatic.
it's very easy to make me happy.
excuse me.
Steve Baker's on. The
Yeah.
Lipmans are on. Whoa, we're moving right along here.
Mhm.
Well, how is everybody feeling today?
Elated, we're about to blow the shofar.
Sorry?
have,
We're about to blow the shofar.
Yeah, I think we might.
I have this feeling of lightness.
Me too. How about exhale? You know, like in meditation,
Like you realize you've been holding your breath for 4 years?
you know, like your shoulders have been all hunched and now
Yes.
they're relaxing.
Yeah, Martin said just 1 week without the president doing something crazy. Is that too much to ask? Ah,
Nice. Whoa, we
Martin-
almost have a minion.
Martin, it looks like we're actually recording. Is that correct?
I don't know. Yeah, I think that's the default.
Oh, is it? Okay.
so where does that record? To the Brit Shalom?
To the cloud, there's a cloud thing that recorded.
I'm sorry, where does it record to, Martin?
In the cloud, into the Zoom cloud. You can go get it if you.
Because some of these things I've seen on YouTube.
No wonder.
Peter is in.
Awesome.
So you want to give another minute?
Yeah, and that'll work for me.
We're beyond. We have a minion already. So
Yeah, actually, you know what? You can take down the sheet.
really, you don't want me to share?
No, but I'm gonna put up the link where people can just download.
Okay, I'll stop the share. I've stopped the share.
Let's not share it right now.
I've
Hey,
stopped the
Peter,
share.
the Bakers, Ada Paransky, Eric Lipman. My goodness,
Oh,
look at
it's
all
making
you
it
people.
gets.
So,
Shiny, happy people.
oh,
Oh, well.
I hope we're all shiny and happy.
I'm very shiny. I just took a shower. Can't you see how much I'm shiny?
Yes,
Look here.
I have a
Shiny.
new hair
Shiny.
gel that makes my, yes.
Looks very
Oh.
nice. And Martin, you left China?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm gonna go back to China. 1 second. No,
I
I've
think
left China
Wilmington,
because
Delaware would be appropriate right now.
Yay,
this is
yay.
the British Shalom account, and the British Shalom account doesn't have my background.
Okay, oh, okay.
Oh.
There you
You
go.
look very official.
Oh yeah, I am. Do I look like British Shalom?
All right, well, I'm gonna get started for this. I'm gonna share with you all. There is a link to a handout today that is not necessarily relevant to anything that we will. I'm not going to be referring to it, but this is a guide for you all. I mean, I may refer to a little bit of it, but this is like a guide. This has on it a who's who in Constantine's family, because that was a little hard to follow. I have a timeline. Now, there's a timeline in the back of Carol's book, but I also added into there
Oh, there is? Oh.
some Jewish, that actually in the paper book edition, it starts on page 623. So I don't know if in any other version, if it's there, but I added in there a lot of other Jewish events and things that preceded the birth of Christ, from this, about the kind of where Jewish Christian relations were heading when this all got started. I have also, side by side, the Nicene and the Apostles' Creeds, so that you can take a look and compare from this, because there are some churches that only do the Apostles' Creed. There are some churches that do the Nicene Creed, and that there have been changes from this in both, from this over time. And the last part of the handout is a summary of all of Paul's writings. Yes,
Ooh.
Debbie, did you have a question?
No, I was just, I found it on, Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, for this, but this not only has in it the summary from this, which I got from children's sources about Paul's writings. I've also added in some quotations from each of the books that may be familiar to you. One of the ones that I thought was very interesting was there's a saying from First Thessalonians that says, "Therefore, encourage one another and build one another up." And if you have ever been to a YMCA, you will find that statement on the wall of the workout room.
Oh,
Oh, I never,
Yes,
never looked.
yes, I've seen it.
Yeah,
Sarah,
yeah.
and
There you
it's
go. So
totally,
now you know where it comes from.
okay.
So I kind of cherry picked through some statements that I thought you might be familiar to you all that do come directly from Paul, not only from his writings to the church, but also his writings to the individuals, the two Timothys, um, uh, um, uh, Philemon and Titus. So from this, some of which are better known than others. So anyway, that's there. For those of you who might have come in late from this, if that's not there, I will post that. Let me just post a couple of other things that might be of help. Well, at least one more, and then at the end, I'll do for the next meeting. Hold on. And that is that James Carroll spoke on C-SPAN from this. It was part of a book fair back in 2001 where he talked about the book. It's a very interesting, it's about a 2-hour conversation. Cynthia Ozick is also speaking. There's some tape remarks from Elie Wiesel, which are really, really, really difficult to listen to because the quality of the of the tape was terrible. 2001, gee, that was recent history, right? And also the author Mary Gordon, who was extremely, extremely critical of James Carroll's book and his whole thing about the Pope, where she really kind of goes after him. So
Where is that?
I just posted that in the chat from this, so you can pull that up. But that's on C-SPAN, and it's very.
So
Yeah.
was Mary Gordon critical of his statements about Pius XII? Is that the Pope you're talking about?
She is very critical of everything that he wrote.
But which Pope? Is it Pius XII?
Of Pius from this.
Okay, that's the Pope.
Not particularly enamored of the whole, the whole Christian thing. And she is Roman Catholic, by the way.
Mhm.
Much so.
She has written for this. Suzanne, I think you had talked a while back that she had written a book about Jesus, I think. Is that
She's
right?
written a lot, and I know that her Catholicism, I think she's written some memoirs. I'd have to look it up again, but her
Yeah.
Catholicism comes through very clearly.
Yeah.
And Carroll, although he left the priesthood, is also, so it should be interesting to read that. So I do have one question for you.
Yes,
Is there
ma'am.
any way that you can take these links and maybe like post them or text them or something? Because I want to keep them and it's kind of hard to do from the chat room.
I can send an email as well.
Great.
This
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
yes. Yes, please.
That'll be fine. Carol, we've missed you.
You can.
We're so glad you're back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a long couple of months.
It's been a long
What can I
haul.
say?
I know. Well, welcome back, and we really have missed you. All right. So let's get started. So let me begin by asking, how many of you, by the way, just as an aside, James Carroll refers to him as Constantine. So since he's the author of the book, I will do the same. How many of you knew about this history of the church and the whole thing from this before you read this book.
Wait a minute, some of it not.
Okay. Okay.
And then new, I
Yeah.
mean, yes, I had been exposed to a teeny bit of it, but I don't even count it.
Little bit.
Yeah, it's, what I found is that there were pieces he'd mention that I was aware of, but then put them in a context where I hadn't been as aware of the whole context. I also have to say, as somebody who considered myself fairly educated about this time period, the number of things I had to look up was phenomenal. So for what that's worth.
For example, what did you have to look up that you did that was confusing? you a
Name
little
one.
bit? Name just one.
Well, I will tell you that yesterday I sat down and read like 3 separate Wikipedia articles, one on the fall of Rome, one on the Huns, one on the Goths. It's history that I thought I knew, but again, putting it in the context of how Western Europe fell apart and then regrouped, because he talks about that as an important way that anti-Semitism of the church grew. So I sort of had to rethink it all in the way that he presented it.
Okay. Aaron, you
Yes.
set your hand up as somebody who knew about this.
Yes. Do not forget, Marilyn and I went to Houston Baptist University to get our nursing degrees. And being at a private university, one is required, mandated to take 3 religion classes. And the religion classes included one in the New Testament and one on Christian doctrine. Now, these weren't classes designed to brainwash you. These were classes taught at university level, by academics. But taking these classes and reading the books, and you have to, they're at a university level, they're a high level. So yes, very familiar with the history, very familiar with the doctrine and the various doctrines also, and still have my books which I refer to every once in a while, especially when I'm dealing with Christian doctrine.
Okay. Ed, Ed, you're there. You mentioned that you said that you had known about this.
Yeah, well, 2 things. One, I'm a history buff, so I knew, all the history of the Huns, et cetera, and the fall of the Roman Empire. But when I started college, I started Queens College, and one course, it was a year course called Contemporary Civilization, and you had to study philosophers. And the person who taught the first term was a super devout Roman Catholic. He was a professor. He was always playing with his beads. I mean, talk about separation of church and state. It really wasn't there. And he went wild on Paul. He brought in Peter, who wasn't even in the book, Augustine, and I forget who the other one was, but it was so heavily indoctrinated, and here am I, a 17-year-old putz hearing a lot of this, and it was really wild. But we had a couple of veterans in the class who were not
Brainwashed.
It wasn't that they were brainwashed. They weren't. I wasn't going to challenge this idiot, okay? But they started bringing up that the Pope is the only religious leader who had his own army, who led an army, who did, massacres and all of that. So it was a wonderful education.
Okay, Suzanne?
I don't know the history at all, but I wanted to remind people, if you didn't know, that James Carroll has written a number of popular books. This is probably more from his academic, or he was a priest. So the name is pretty well recognized, but I had never, and I haven't read as much as I should have, read anything so much infused with his Catholic upbringing, and yet he writes like a novelist. So that's good.
So is this in some ways a critical memoir
It might, it might be, I don't know.
of the church or of himself?
Yes,
Of himself.
yes.
Himself, more so.
Well, it's clearly a mixture between, let's call it historical fact, whatever the heck that means, because I'm not sure we know what that is, and his own life trajectory.
Mhm.
And they're woven together.
Yeah.
If he took out talking about his mother, the book would be about half the size.
But I think
It got to be a little much, yeah.
Yes.
He
I
has
think it's
more
also
issues.
like,
I'm sorry, Ed, go ahead.
no, that's okay. I think it's also like, when
There is an author's
we
point
might
of
have
view.
found out that the Bible wasn't the only thing we believed, and that it's Jewish law, Jewish understanding of meaning didn't end with the Torah. And he's explaining in much more detail, because he's giving you the history of the church. He can explain where certain doctrines happened, that maybe those were misinterpretations. Certainly that it's not reading the New Testament alone that explains Catholicism to you.
I
No,
think
but
he's also explaining his anguish. And
Yes,
I respect him for trying to grapple with, in particular, he just hits you from the first page, is what is this thing with the cross? And I am impressed that he is trying to figure out why the symbol of a cross would be such an anathema to Jews. And I have already told this very quick vignette to Debbie and Martin, so apologies, but I just want to give you an example of that. I just retired after 42 years in a Catholic school, and I pretty much advertised my Jewishness, and to the school's credit, I was utilized in a good way to do, I did many Holocaust presentations as well as other presentations on Judaism. It was, I was very, very open with faculty and kids. Everybody knew it. I got a going away, I got a retirement gift. And you want to know what the retirement gift was?
Whom? From the principal?
From the head of the school. And I came home and I opened it up. I knew it was a piece of art, and front center on the art is Jesus on the cross.
Oh.
I mean, so, but with honestly, I don't believe she meant ill by it. It's not the first time this has happened. I've gotten plenty of plates with Mary on it and things like, you know, those were mass gifts at Christmas time, things like that.
yeah.
So sometimes they take the time to, and I really appreciated to give me something special, but there were only 3 of us retiring. So, you know, I found a wonderful home for this painting at St. Cecilia's Catholic Church, so I feel really good about that. But I just looked at it agape going, boy, they really,
Don't
at least
get
they don't get it.
yes,
I'm sure
yes,
she thought of it as a token of love.
yes. It was done out of love for her.
Yeah.
in her-
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
So-
it's,
Okay,
I've experienced this several times with people who give me religious writings out of love. I had an employee who, well, after he worked for me for a while, came to me one day and gave me a copy of the New Testament and told me that it was very important that I, you know, he cared about me a lot, and he was giving this to me as a gift. And then I had another employee who's Mormon, who, when I had my cancer, came down and visited and handed me the Book of Mormon with all the pages that talk about healing highlighted.
Wow.
It worked.
You know, just
The
last
point is
night,
that the notion that someone wants to use, you need to use my religion, my faith, because that's the way to be healed. Completely
Yeah,
convinced
but
of
I
that,
think-
right?
so
Active love.
last night, Joe Biden said there was a beautiful hymn from his faith. He will raise you up on eagle's wings.
Mhm.
And I'm like, excuse me.
Right.
I mean,
I
and-
just wanted to say the thing, Marcia, about what you said is I think a little different than giving somebody the New Testament. I agree with you. I think that Catholics sometimes, it's just they don't understand that the cross has a different meaning
Yes.
to you than it does to them. And I'm always struck by the fact that one of my dearest friends from medical school was raised Catholic. And when we were in Baltimore, I had said to her, okay, I'm pregnant, like, where should I give birth? And she told me to go to St. Joseph's in Towson, Maryland. So I went on a tour and she said, oh, you'll be fine. I said, are there crosses everywhere? She said, oh no, don't worry about it. And like, I went on the tour of the maternity ward, and it's like, you get off the elevator and there's this 3-foot crucifix hanging on the wall. And I said to her afterwards, like, didn't you notice it? And it was like, it was totally out of her consciousness. And I think that's different than giving somebody the New Testament because you want them to hear the good word. I think it's, I don't quite have the words for it, but I think it's different, that it's just such an ordinary part of their life that they don't see how it could be offensive to you.
Debbie, and then Suzanne.
Yeah. What is interesting to me, and one thing that what he's doing is he's saying, how did it get to be the cross? Why is the cross the central symbol? What about the resurrection? What about love? Right? And what was touching to me, how he summarized what he saw as the very early development, in which these grieving Jews talked about their beloved mentor in terms from their own literature, like Isaiah and so on. And how it was really interesting to me how somewhere in the next 300 years, the literature became the prediction rather than a way to think about our loss. And then when it became the prediction of what would happen in Jesus' life, then the people who rejected that prediction became enemies. So that was the first part of it, is how they flipped what the Torah does, the Tanakh does. And the second part of it is, how did we get focused on the crucifixion? Why that? And because what you mean, if you think about it from the outside, why would anybody carry around a symbol of terrible suffering and death, which, by the way, was also a symbol of the Roman Empire and how they did things? So that's what's interesting to me in the first part of the book, how that was developed.
Suzanne, Aaron, and then Eric.
I was just going to point out that, at least to me, the little I've been able to read, like I said, it's infused with his Catholicism. And of course, Carroll is a man who's probably had contacts with a lot of different people, a lot of different faiths, but it is so much a part of him. And I want to reiterate that I think, maybe going back to what Marcia said, it is possible, I'd like to say this, that the person who gave you the gift, it didn't occur to them, I think you said this, that you would find this,
I agree.
I have to say, offensive. Yeah. And I have to add to that, my dad taught part-time for a number of years at a Catholic high school in Charlotte, North Carolina. He taught photography and he taught drafting. And when he died, the principal, of the school came back from a retreat to go to my dad's funeral. And she called up his widow and she said, what should we bring? So Louise said to them, well, it's customary to bring, deli. And that's what she did. I mean, the question was there. I just think it would be because I knew so little about this, and I've been thinking about learning history of all sorts the last few days. I know a lot of people would say no, but I think it's probably very important for Jews to sit down and read some of this, more like I don't want to say for dummies, but we always used to say for dummies means you're too smart to not know anything. Because there's an awful lot that we could learn that we may not agree with, but as people have said, it answers some questions. And I'm looking forward to getting further into the book because of that. And now I'll shut up for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Sue, I think you raised an important question that I'd like to speak directly to. Yes, he comes from a very specific point of view. And the topic itself, how Christians and Jews separated and how things got to be that culminated in the Holocaust, he's not the only one who's written about it.
No.
Okay. I think of Rosemary Ruther, Pagels, and there's a whole bunch of other people. But what I was struck with on page 190, 191, when he summarizes, he really states his point of view in which the crucifix and the cross and the resurrection become, for him, how Christianity is identified. And that's the cause.
We'll be back.
You froze.
Frozen.
You froze.
Okay.
You backtrack a little bit.
Let it go.
Okay. Page 191. That's the critical, the author's point of view as far as why he wrote the book, what he believes in, how he differs in a lot of ways, because he's also a very honest guy. He does talk about some of the other people who are working in the field to try to, like Ruther, for example, and Pagels, who I've read. His take is different, and it's important for people to understand that also. His point of view. It's not just about his mother. It's about, it's really about the resurrection, the crucifixion, and the resurrection, and the part that played in Christian theology.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Eric, make sure that you unmute.
Unmute.
Unmute. Unmute.
There you
Okay,
go.
there you go. There you go. Okay, well, regardless, it's like there's since I had a comment, so much has been said, but it's, I guess, trying to build on Aaron's point there. What was profoundly important was the shift under Constantine from, well, for one thing, Constantine basically was this incredibly diverse notions of what Christianity was. And Constantine basically eliminated all, it was the persecution of heretics. It took out all of the alternative interpretations of what Christianity would be, except for what the Council of Nicaea came up with. And, but you could see, you'd see this change. I remember he wrote about looking at, I guess, Christian graves in the catacombs, the symbols they have, up until Christianity became the faith of the established faith of the Roman Empire. The fish, there was an emphasis on water. There was, not this execution device. I keep going back to that Lenny Bruce joke he talked about, that if Christ had lived in the 20th century, they'd be running, people would be walking around little electric chairs or hanging from their necks.
Yeah.
That's what's in Carol, and he cited that, and it's really so true. But I want to stress about Carol is that every point right through the book he said this is all contingent. Nothing had to develop as it had. There are always alternative paths that could have been taken. And, if a different faith had been established, as the faith of the Roman Empire, I mean, there was actually, paganism was actually evolving toward this monotheism. In fact, it looked like Constantine was playing with the sun god, Apollo, before he ever decided, hey, it's more advantageous to me to get support in Rome by going with the Christians. But I mean, I've always been very impressed by this book, and I think it's the timing is great because it should be read in conjunction with Cantor Levine's course on anti-Semitism, because they really complement each other very well. You've got, basically Cantor Levine saying, here's what was coming at us, and this is what was going on within the Christian world that had such a profound effect upon us. I do want to make one last point before I shut up, and that is that I think the destruction of the temple is really important, because while the temple existed, you had the physical fact of all these diverse sects of Judaism. Everybody would converge on the temple on festival day. Without the temple, it was like there was this centripetal force that just sent everybody off. There was no common point anymore. So anyway.
Martin?
So 3 things. Number one, to demonstrate. So here's my Book of Mormon with the pages marked for healing. Here is the New Testament that I was given by the other guy, but it's a Hebrew English version. It's just like, and then in it, he put a card. Here's the card. This card, to refer to what Debbie was talking about, is all the places in the Old Testament, quote unquote, that presage or predict the coming of Jesus. And the front of the card says, Yeshua HaMashiach. Jesus the Messiah. That's point one. Just like, those are my exhibits. Number 2, if you look at one of the comments that Carol makes, that I actually mentioned in Mark's class the other day as well, it's very important to understand, and that is that, and it relates back to Eric's comment about the destruction of the temple. Once the temple is gone, Christianity develops as Carol describes it, with the Council of Nicaea and all that stuff. And Judaism develops not in the Roman Empire, but in Babylon, with the Babylonian Talmud. And in that sense, Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism are sibling religions, both coming out of what originally happened in Temple Judaism. And the notion that there are sibling religions and not one is superseded by the other, because Rabbinic Judaism is also an outcome of that history as opposed to a predecessor of Christianity. That's number 2. Number 3, I find very enlightening that, and maybe I didn't realize this, I should have realized it, but didn't, that this anti-Semitism as we understand it in the Western world is all based in Christianity. When Debbie and I were in China, one of the things, we'd get into this conversation with Chinese people and they'd say, and we'd somehow along a conversation about Jerusalem and the place of Jerusalem and three religions that all find Jerusalem to be an important place and all that stuff that we know about. And the Chinese couldn't give a damn. It is of absolutely no consequence to them. It
Yeah.
means nothing that there are three religions who think that Jerusalem is a holy city, meaningless. And we said, well, what do you think about Jews? And what they said was, well, we have a very high opinion of Jews. They're really good at business, almost as good as the Chinese.
Please.
I compliment. I compliment.
And you had a comment.
Yeah, I found the that whole discussion of what happened between the fall of the temple and the Council of Nicaea really, really interesting. I mean, I knew parts of it and all of that. The one thing I was hoping I would get out of that, he traced how Christianity came from it, but he really didn't discuss all the different, how should I say, limbs of Christianity that were destroyed at the Council of Nicaea. How all the other books that, that were written were burnt. I mean, we now know there was a Gospel of Thomas.
Right, Thomas.
There was a Gospel of, I think, Mary Magdalene. I mean, there was a whole bunch of, other Gospels that we don't even know exist at this point that were burnt. I don't know, Aaron, you might know more, but
Yeah, if you want to know more,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
here's a 1,000-page book. Here's
And
Aaron, we're gonna buy you a new modem.
the first 3,000 years.
Aaron, would you put the name of and the author of the book in the chat, please, from this? And then I want to call on Carol, Debbie, and then Eric.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one of the things that I also understood from reading this is why some of the other quote unquote religions were persecuted so much during the entirety of Western Europe. I'm thinking of the Roma, who, while nominally Christian, also have a lot of, I guess it's like animist. What's that word?
Animism.
Beliefs. Yes, thank you. Beliefs.
You're welcome.
And things like the Druids and a lot of the religions that were sort of on the periphery of where the Roman Empire was, why they were so threatening also to Christianity because of their decision to think that they were the culmination of this historic set of prophecies. And it's interesting to realize that it didn't have to be that way.
Debbie, then Eric.
Okay, so if you've read or listened to the curses, which appear in two places in the Torah, what will happen to us if we disobey? We will be exiled from our land. We will be subjected to other nations. We will be miserable day and night. We will labor and not see the fruits of our labor. So what was striking to me is Augustine, thank you very much. You may live among us with bent backs. And when we, after Martin and I visited Morocco and Spain a million years ago when one could still travel. And I did a lot of reading about the Inquisition and the years leading up to the Inquisition. And there was this tension among the popes, the successive popes. Should we exterminate them? Should we convert them? Or should we continue to let them live among us, but with all kinds of restrictions?
Right.
So they'll continue to be a miserable symbol of what happens when you reject Jesus.
Right.
So I'm saying in a curious way, the origin of all that is that the Torah curses are being used as a description of how the Jews should live forevermore.
Eric and then me.
I guess what Carol's view, I think, of what Constantine did in the way he established the Catholic Church, you know, you talk of the notion of original sin. This is like the original corruption of Christianity, from which I don't think he feels it's ever recovered. You know, to be so, basically, it became an instrument of the state.
Yes.
And that was ultimately corrupting. And I think, well, by putting just on another point, by putting the focus on the crucifix, but basically instead of Christ lived for us, he died for us. And I think that profound shift with the focus on the crucifixion, well, if he died for us, well, who is responsible for his death? That, you know, it set the stage so appallingly.
One of the things that kept going through my head as I was reading this is, I mean, we've had, I think we've had even in this group conversations about the fact that Judaism seems to put, at least modern Judaism, puts an enormous amount of emphasis on the Shoah, and that all Jewish history, as far as modernists are concerned, begins and ends in many ways with the Shoah. Does this book kind of reinforce that feeling? Does it shift that conversation a little bit? One of the things that Carol said in the book signing is, he said, a history that emphasizes Jewish victimhood as a main note of the past can seem to posit something permanent in that victimhood going into the future. So is that,
You're frozen.
that true as well?
No.
Yes.
Am I alive? Can you hear me?
You're here, Lada, but we can't see you, but that's okay.
Okay. I look the same as I did a few minutes ago.
Okay.
I would say, Sue, that I don't think the emphasis of this book on the Shoah reinforces the Jewish emphasis on the Shoah, because when we use it as Jews, I think we emphasize it, and probably emphasize it too much, as a reason to be Jewish because they tried to kill us, and that usually doesn't work. You know, I see it in the generation of my nieces and nephews, and probably our own, that you can't be Jewish because of all the bad things that happened to you. So at least the Jews who are thinking about the future of Judaism, while the Shoah was a tremendous thing that happened, there's so much else of joy and living within Jewish practice that the Shoah should not be front and center. And when it is, it's very ineffective.
That was referred to. Carol refers to that. He refers to Salo Baron and the Lachrymose.
The Lachrymose theory, yeah.
Right, the Lachrymose look at history. So yeah, I mean, for Jewish historians, yeah, that was definitely one view of Jewish history, but not the only one, obviously. Thank God.
Eric, and Debbie, then Suzanne.
Yeah, I was going to mention that about the Lachrymose view. He actually deals with that, but I actually felt that my own personal practice and use of words was, I'm embarrassed to say, I mean, if you asked me to talk about what happened to us in World War II, I'd say Holocaust, which I never really fully grappled with the notion of Holocaust as sacrifice. And Holocaust as sacrifice leads to that notion of the cross facing Auschwitz, that somehow this was a sacrifice for some offered for some kind of greater cosmic good, as opposed to Shoah, which is a catastrophe, period. And it really, and Carol emphasized that, and I picked it up and I said, you know, I'm gonna change how I speak of this.
Yep.
Shoah, not Holocaust, because there are intellectual predispositions built into the word Holocaust.
Exactly.
Just as an aside from this, one of the early Holocaust critics from this, who was also responsible for the creation of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, said that his preference is to call that period the Chorban.
But
Korban
Korban means sacrifice. It's
That's a
Korban.
sacrifice,
It's
right?
Korban in Hebrew.
But I mean, I'm happy with. I guess I'm as happy as I could be with you. Shoah. Holocaust has been taken over also by events in Cambodia and Laos and other places from this. But Chorban from this, I've got a lot of problems with that. Then Suzanne.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, sort of to echo what Eric said, what I was thinking was, it's just a really interesting thing to become preoccupied with death rather than with life. And I mean, the focus on the death, there's a kind of a side order of guilt. I mean, the Germans should be guilty. We should be guilty if we don't practice Judaism better. But death as an example, death as guilt, death as a horrifying sort of inspiration. This is not, I just feel like Judaism should not be about that. That was echoing what Eric said.
Suzanne, then Marcia.
I was going to say what you said about the overuse of the term Holocaust. So it's connected these days with a lot of other things. But I'd also like to know how public among historians and writers is a discussion that perhaps the Shoah, which has been the central portion and the central thing for Judaism, certainly in my generation and up to now, that younger people don't necessarily, for good or bad, see that. How public is a discussion that maybe the Shoah has to be looked at slightly differently these days, perhaps in order to keep younger people in Judaism? And I'm serving as a devil's advocate, so nobody shoot me.
Okay, Marcia, then Etta.
Well, this is a problem of going in order. So Suzanne, that was an excellent point, but I'm going to respond to something Debbie just said. And that is also, wasn't there a parallel narrative going on also that Jesus is the God of love, in contrast to our Hebrew Bible, where we have a God of wrath? Which one would you choose? I'd go with the love, right? Give me more love. But that's also a distinguishing narrative. And I agree with you, Debbie. There is this preoccupation with his death, but also is characterizing Jesus in an apparently different way.
Mm-hmm.
Etta, then Carol, then Martin, I'm sorry, Eric.
Well, I'm responding to Suzanne, who spoke before Marcia. And I would say it isn't that we should, and I really mean this, we should not be teaching the Holocaust necessarily differently. We shouldn't be emphasizing that when in our tradition, it is a part of it. So is the Inquisition. And that's a real problem. Now, why is it when we were growing up, well, the Holocaust was still fresh. Our parents' generations, many were survivors, and we were learning things. And it became real important during the Eichmann trial, because this was there. It was Israel's chance to spread it on the news, and they did a good job. but that's different from today, where, no, one would hope that the state of Israel has produced a whole lot of stuff that we care about, and our Jewish life in general. I mean, Israel has its own problems, but our Jewish life in general has so much more of fullness to it, that we know how to mourn, and we mourn, and that's part of our tradition. But mourning is a process that takes us back to all of the other things that are wonderful about Judaism. So that's my response to Suzanne. And to Marcia, you know, it's funny when you talk about a God of love versus a God of wrath. I always think of it, when I think of it as a God of love versus a God of law. And I really felt like I got that from the book, because we still do odd things like Shomer Shabbat and lighting candles, even though there's no temple. We don't do the temple stuff anymore, but we have a bunch of laws about how we have sex, how we eat, how we drink. And Christianity gave those up because of love.
Yeah.
Carol, Eric, and Peter.
Yeah.
And
So I
then-
wanted to say
Oh,
two
and then-
things. One is about teaching the Holocaust as if it is the entirety of Jewish history. You know, so I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, and Seth's family came to the United States around the turn of the century from Russia directly. And so we've had to kind of work this through in how we teach our children. We have, you know, I grew up with the Holocaust front and center, but my parents and my grandparents were survivors. And I don't want my children to lose that piece of their history, but they also have this whole other piece of Jewish history that has nothing to do with it, that is their family history too. And so I do think that there's much more of a tension in teaching this generation about how to see their Judaism. And Suzanne, in answer to your question about how do we teach the Holocaust to kids, all I can tell you is, so Naomi is now enrolled at JTS. She's a freshman. And I can tell you, yes, she's at JTS in Barnard. Of course, she's at home, but she's at JTS Barnard doing the dual degree program. And, you know, in high school, she complained so much about, she was already tired of reading Holocaust novels. She was like, do I have to read another Holocaust novel? Like, can't they find something else? But at JTS, she's finding that there's a much broader view of the Jewish history courses that she's expected to take. So, you know, I think that unfortunately, the way we're teaching it in the middle school and high school level is still very Holocaust focused, and it's to our and the kids' detriment, because I think they're a lot interested in a much broader view of Jewish history.
Thank you.
Great. Eric, Peter, Ed, Lisa, and then me.
Well, I just want to stress that Carol, when he deals with the point about the Christianity of love versus the God of wrath or the God of law, he made it quite clear, at least to me, that Jesus's notions of love were Jewish. They came from the Jewish tradition,
He's a Jew.
and that it was only with the writing of the Gospels and the amplification of the conflicts between, you know, the Christians and the sort of Pharisaic Jews that you started getting these aspersions. You know, this contrast that we represent love, they represent, you know, you better earn it. You know, you better earn the love. It's not there. And there's and it unfortunately that became, you know, one of those, you know, it became one of those anti-Semitic prejudices that have followed us ever since.
Okay. Peter?
Sometimes I think we've often thought about the Holocaust as the crucifixion and Israel as the resurrection, but I am a Holocaust museum docent, so I often have to think about how we teach the Holocaust. And my approach to it is more, what is it in human nature that caused it, and how can we guard against that? So I mean, in some ways, of course, I teach the Holocaust when I lead them through the museum, but I sometimes say the Holocaust is already behind us. The question is, what is it that happened that can be prevented in the future if we think about things differently?
Okay, Ed and Lisa.
Okay, I'm getting back to the cross. We said we don't want to talk about the Holocaust, so I'll talk about the cross. One of the things about Constantine, and I read this long time ago, so I don't remember the source, but Constantine's using the cross was a militaristic move, because all of a sudden a sword, if you think about it, the sword became a type of cross, and it blurred this business that the cross was used by the Romans to kill people. So the cross now became a strong object. And remember, Constantine then conquered all the other people using the sword. And from that point on, while the Catholic Church talks about the cross as Jesus, as far as implementing it, they've used the sword to implement Christianity. When you think, I mean, it's not just, during Constantine's time, when, and this is where he was talking, when the Catholics came to Central America and they saw all these totems that the Aztecs and the Incas had, they burned them. They always used the sword to make that point, and then they say, geez, Jesus died on the cross. So, it was a very good public relations task.
Lisa Martin, and then I will finish us off.
I would like to add that one thing that not necessarily sparked anti-Semitism, but helped the Christians in freely doing whatever they were going to do is that, especially in Catholicism, you have sin, you go to confession, and you say a few prayers, whatever the priest has indicated you should, and then you're absolved. So it's almost the kind of thing that you can do bad things and then it's easy to wash them away. So you don't have that feeling of guilt.
Martin?
So just a comment about the Holocaust and its position, and I think it's clear from what Carol says that part of it is the evolution of Christianity and the antipathy from Christianity to Jews. I think Hitler's program is a lot beyond that as well, more like a form of modern racism, which is more than just Christianity. That's number one. Number two, I think that we have, just like we have coronavirus fatigue, there's a lot of Holocaust fatigue. And it's Holocaust fatigue because people manipulate the Holocaust for other purposes. So any leader that goes to visit Israel must go to Yad Vashem. It's like obligatory. And there are plenty of people, and Sue knows this from her own experience teaching at Bris Shalom, who somehow believe that teaching the Holocaust is the way to create Jews. And it's clearly not the case. Certainly modern American Jewish kids won't become more Jewish because 75 years ago, a lot of Jews were killed. That's not the way you get them to become Jewish. And I think it's gratifying. Oh, and as part of that, if you go to Jerusalem or Bnei Brak today with COVID, or you go to Brooklyn, when police try to enforce social distancing rules, what are they called? Nazis. It's manipulation of the Holocaust. I think that's a bad idea. On the other hand, if you look at the typical Holocaust museum in the United States, there is a tendency, an intention to have exhibits that would talk about the destruction of other people, racism against people other than Jews. In other words, to broaden the message. And that's even true today of Yad Vashem. So if you go to Yad Vashem now versus what Yad Vashem looked like 15, 20, 30 years ago, there's a lot more there about other kinds of racism and attempts to kill, to genocide and so forth than there used to be even at Yad Vashem. So there's a healthy trend in putting the Holocaust in the context of other kinds of things. And so I think that's good.
It is 11 o'clock, so we're going to have to end this. So just a couple of things. I put in the chat also our next meeting and what we're going to be reading as we move forward. And anybody who would like to volunteer to lead from this, more than welcome for you to step forward either now or to get in touch. Oh, Martin wants to do it? Awesome. Martin will take care of that. This was a great discussion. I want to leave you with a couple of things. A study that was done, a survey rather, was done about a couple of years ago, and the results were published, I think, just this past June. It was the committee that is in charge of reparations to Jews from individuals or countries because of the Holocaust, who wanted to know from American, mostly Jews, and they did a 50-state survey of this, of Jews between the ages of 18 and 30, I think. What do you know about the Holocaust? And they said that 69% of the respondents knew nothing. Could not tell you how many Jews died, could not tell you who was who were the main characters of this, could not name any major survivors, could not do anything like that. So I want to kind of leave you with that. Number two, the two questions I want to leave you with is this book sort of the beginning for us in a conversation with the Catholic Church of a truth and reconciliation kind of commission to find out what it is that we need to do, for each other on this? And the second thing is, this is basically, the Catholic Church is a nation state that has emissaries and ambassadors from this. Is this really what the Catholic Church wants to continue? I want to kind of leave you with those questions. Sorry we didn't get a chance to get to them.
Yeah, we can't, after you end the meeting, we don't know, we can't get access to chat anymore, right?
I will have all the stuff in as well, but I just wanted to post that so you could see that. Yes, and some shameless advertising for Peter's class next week.
Yay!
Yes, but and we'll make sure that gets out there as well. Any other last comments, questions, announcements?
This was an excellent discussion, and thank you, Sue, for keeping us on.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Great job.
Thank you.
Great job. A lot of work put into this.
Great good as well. Thank you so much for this. You all have a safe, healthy week and just continue on.
Blow the shofar.
Carry on, carry
Blow the
on.
shofar.
Keep going.
What? What?
What?
I didn't hear what she said.
Keep the
Okay,
Keep the faith.
keep the
Keep the
faith.
faith.
I'll do my best.
I'm leaving with that comment. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Marty,
Yes.
Marty, before we go, have you ever seen this book?
Ooh,
I
interesting.
think that's what I just bought. Is it?
Yeah, I think we have it.
Yeah,
I think
that's
we have it.
Brettler. That's Brettler and what's her name?
Berlin?
No. Hang on. Brettler and
Excuse me.
Levine, Amy Jill Levine. And you might, that's it. Yeah, that's Amy Jill Levine. And
Okay,
and Mark Brettler.
okay.
And that's very interesting, you know, because it's not just the Hebrew and the English.
Did you say Mark Bressler?
Bressler.
Yeah, so Mark Bressler's daughter was at Harvard with Ariel.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
He came to the wedding.
yeah.
Interesting. Well, he's a pretty interesting guy. Well, they both are. Amy Jill is also. But yeah, that would be something to pick up on.
What is this? Who is playing this?
Playing what?
Aaron. Oh, the music?
Okay, guys, I'm signing off the meeting.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.